what I do, and certainly for many people, for most people who know me, whether it's on television, through book and so forth, I'm defined by my culinary identity. That's who I am, and that type, my culinary culture, certainly. And that culture is expressed in ritual, like I go mushrooming in the wood, or fishing for frog, or playing lawn bowling, which is pétanque or boule in France. And those rituals in terms of expressed very often in traditional recipe, like certain type of dishes, which goes with those occupations and all that. So it's a kind of down the line culinary culture for me. And certainly that's what I try to instill in my daughter, because cooking is extremely important for us. It defines, as I say, ourselves. And I could quote Levi-Strauss there, who say that the process of cooking is the process by which nature is transformed into culture. And I think for me it's a very profound statement, because that's what we are. And so many of the deals, so many of what we do happen around the table. Great cook and great chef. Certainly the cook itself, or great chef in some restaurant, very often don't have that much to do with the cooking anymore. You go to the Waldorf Astoria, for example, then the chef will have to contend with several banquets of 1,000, 1,500 people. So he will go organize, of course, work out his menu, taste here and there, but that's about it. If you want to make a distinction between, in a sense, a pencil chef and a skillet chef, and the skillet chef being someone who will have a small restaurant, or someone like Thomas Keller here, and who will be behind the stove cooking day after day, morning after morning. So that's really someone involved in the cooking itself. Both of those are chefs. By definition, I am not a chef unless I work in a professional kitchen with other people who are working for me. So I am called the chef, which is the chief in France, to run that kitchen. When I go back at home, I'm the cook there. My wife is the chef. It's different. Running a restaurant is a very, very complex thing, very complicated and very uncomplicated, because the quality of a restaurant is always based on the quality of the food versus the price, and that's as simple as that. But to get there is not that easy. Now, when you're the cook there and you have the owner, and you can kind of cook and express yourself and work in the kitchen, follow certain ideas, tastes that you have, it's probably easier than when you become the owner, when you have to start thinking about the food cost, about hiring people, about firing people, about all kind of other things that as a chef you would like not to have to deal with. But certainly in our world today, when I was a child, the chef or the cook was at the bottom of the social scale, and any good mother would have wanted her child to marry a doctor, a lawyer, or an architect, but not a cook. Now we are genius. See what happened in the last 30 years. So it's totally different. And now the young chef content with publicity, with PR people, with having their name all over in the newspaper and so forth. And this is good in some way, not too good in other way, because a lot of young chefs will go into that business to, quote, become Emery Lagasse or Bobby Flay and, quote, become famous, which probably will never happen. When in fact you should go in that business only for one reason, and the reason is because you love it and you feel gratified by it. Because if you don't, you will sweat a lot, you still work Saturday, Sunday, you still work 16 hours a day, and you still probably have varicose veins by the time you're 40 years old, and you don't really make much money. However, if you're gratified by it and if you love it, then it's worth all of this. The joy is to please people. The joy, you always cook for the other. And maybe cooking is maybe the purest expression of love, in the sense that you always, as I say, cook for the other, whether that other is your girlfriend or your wife or your husband or your child or your grandmother or a friend coming over. You have that type of expressing that you do through cooking. And certainly when I'm at home with my wife, we sit down together. I've been married 41 years, and it's a ritual that we've done for 41 years, where we sit down and share a bottle of wine and eat at night. But then I may do a simple roast chicken, a salad, and so forth. Now that's what you may call country cooking, you know. And then if she called me and I'm at the market and she said, well, I just saw such and such, and I told them to come over for lunch or dinner. So I may add a garnish to that, or two garnish to my menu. I may put another bottle of wine on the table, and maybe a napkin, and the chicken I may deglaze with a little bit of white wine and some mushroom, and that becomes bourgeois cooking. And by the time I deglaze it with cognac and I add truffle with it, and we put flour on the table and we put champagne, it's still the same chicken, but that's haute cuisine, you know. So very often the definition of the cuisine is marginal to the cooking itself, you know, it involves other things. Me, I would determine what goes into a restaurant by the season, you know. I mean, there is no other way for me to, and I believe very strongly that we should go back to organic ingredient, to use as much as we can local product. You don't have to pay for the transport, so it's less expensive. Usually when you use something in season, when you have that tomato which is in full season, it's probably where it's the best in terms of taste, which is what I'm the most interested in. But certainly on a nutritional point of view, it reached its peak, and that's when it's the best. And in terms of money, it's probably when it's the least expensive. So why not? Even though now the seasons are kind of blurred at the supermarket by the profusion of product that we come from all over the world, you know. But I still like to go, like I went this weekend, to get corn and get tomato. Well, I had a lot of tomato in my garden myself, and salad, but I like to go to farm. I mean, it's part of a ritual where you get ideas as well. Certainly, when I was young and when I lived in France, and at some point between 1956 and 1959, I worked for the French president, actually under 3 French presidents, because under the Fourth Republic, the government were changing at a quite rapid pace, but I finished with General de Gaulle. At that point, however, I dealt with the lady of the house. In that case, it was Madame de Gaulle, where I would set up the menu for the week. And there was a kind of security in the kitchen which may not be there anymore. By this I mean that there is so much fame with the chef now that he goes into the dining room and get the kudo and get, or the criticism or whatever. So you have that whole part of cooking which did not exist. We never went to the dining room. We were never accepted or asked to go there. It was a totally different type of world. So you had a certain security in the kitchen doing your thing the way you thought it would be, without having to, you know, wonder too much or worried about what they would say in the dining room or whatever. Certainly when I did the head of state at that time, like Eisenhower and Macmillan or Tito or Nehru, I would discuss with the protocol as well as Madame de Gaulle, and often only with the protocol, the dinner of the head of state coming, whether it has to be long or short, whether 1 or 2 meat, or number of course, the number of wine. Certainly there is some limitation that you may have, you know, with religion or other type of taboo. I mean, you're not going to serve you know, a pork chop to the king of Morocco or something like this. So, I mean, there are those things that the protocol will tell you to be careful and to stay. Or maybe the president may have been invited already 3 times and they plan the menu, so you don't want to have like striped bass 3 times in a row or whatever. So those type of limitations. Within this, you would try to show what you know how to do the best and show the season. And certainly in the case of me when I was at the president's, show your country as well, which is what you should do. If I were at the White House, that's what I would do. There are a plethora of young chefs. I mean, from Doug Kane, for example, in California. I mean, there is so many young chefs coming now and exciting with what they are doing. I mean, even at the French Culinary Institute, where I teach here in New York, I am amazed by those young chefs, what they can do in 6 months of the program, which is 600 and some hours, what they can do at the end of those 600 hours. I would never have been able to do that after 3 years of apprenticeship. Even after 5 years. We learn in a totally different way. When I was a child, we stole the trade. We didn't learn it. That is, you would ask the chef, what is this? And he would answer some type of stupidity. You know, you say, what is that sauce called? He say, a sauce nonut, which means nothing at all. He would never tell you how to do anything. And one day he would tell you, tomorrow you start at the stove. You say, me? So you learn through a type of osmosis, looking, and eventually you knew how to do it. You become very proficient with your hand because there was a lot of technique and a lot of manual work to do, chopping, slicing, mincing, and so forth, cleaning up the kitchen and so forth. Now in a place like, for example, at the French Culinary Institute and most of the school, it costs first a fortune. So you cater to the people, you show them, you explain and all that, meaning that they learn much, much faster. However, they're not quite as proficient with their hand as we would have been, as we were. You know, when I was an apprentice, it was a different type of learning way, you know. It's absolutely extremely important, yes, because like any type of manual trade, you have to learn the technique. You have to be a good technician. And this is what I concentrate on my teaching, in the technique, you know, and things which are very often difficult to explain in words, you know, that are very visual. I mean, from chucking an oyster to doing a caramel cage or boning a chicken or doing an omelette and so forth. This is technique that you have to repeat and repeat and repeat and repeat so much that by the time you absorb them, then you can afford to forget them. And then you can afford to think in terms of what the vegetable, I'll do, maybe the texture will go well with that, the color will go well with that, maybe I'll saute that. You think in terms of the future, the dish and your hand work automatically and prepare those things. As long as you are totally obnubilated, you know, if you want, by the slicing of an onion, and someone come around and say, do you have any parsley here? I say, don't disturb me, because you are working on that kind of menial task of slicing the onion, you cannot move forward. You have to get rid of that. And by getting rid of that, you have to practice it enough so you can afford to forget it. Just like if you're a painter, you know, you work 2 or 3 years in a studio, and you learn how to, the law of perspective, and you learn how to mix yellow and blue to do green, and you know you can do that with your thumb or with a spatula and all that, so you kind of learn the trick of the trade, meaning that after 3 years you can stand outside and you can do one painting after another. Does that make you a great artist? No, you're a good technician. That's what you have. Well, in the kitchen, likewise, you know, you have to become a good technician, and I'm sure a surgeon as well as a mason first have to become good technicians before they move forward, you know. Behind the technique itself, that is the knowledge of whatever trade it is, then there is of course talent, and there is talent. There is also someone, the willingness of doing this, and you have to keep at it. And there is a certain discipline involved in that. So the discipline, as long as with the talent, with the proper technique, with a certain openness to learn with other people, eventually you reach to a certain level where you can express yourself. Because in the kitchen, certainly, all you have to say is, yes, chef, as an apprentice. That's about it, you know. And because the chef is not going to ask you your opinion, you go work at Daniel or Jean-Georges in New York, or any of the great restaurants, you are going to do what the chef wants there, because the kitchen has been set up by someone with a great chef and had a vision of the way the food should be. So you're there to learn. So you absorb and you learn, and then you change a year later, work with someone else who may not do exactly, who probably will not do the same thing in the same manner. So you learn another way, another point of view, another way of looking at things. And after you do that for a number of years, 7, 8, 10 years, then you have absorbed that enormous amount of material which you kind of regurgitate, if you want, excuse me for the pun, but you regurgitate that through your own sense of aesthetic, through your own sense of idea. And then you start creating your own type of cuisine with your own idea at that point. I had a column in the New York Times for a number of years, yes. And interestingly enough, column I had in the New York Times was called The Purposeful Cook. The idea was there to cook for a family of 6 for the least amount of money. Well, I did a book, so there was a focus there. I did a book for the Cleveland Clinic for cardiac patient weight loss. That's another focus. I did a book once, an editor asked me, could you do a book with the least amount of cooking, least amount of cleaning, least amount of whatever, you know, for someone. So I did that book called The Shortcut Cook. Then I did the book of technique. So those are all, whether it's dieting or whether it's a technique or whether it's to do, like I have a series now, Cook Jacques Pepin Fast Food My Way, is to show people how to cook good, simple, healthy food in a very minimal amount of time. And it's a question of thinking about it, whether I want to go through the process of doing everything myself in terms of technique, or certainly in the few years, because it has become easier and easier to do, use the supermarket as a prep cook, which is what I do in Fast Food My Way. I can go to the supermarket, get a skinless, boneless breast of chicken, pre-sliced mushroom, pre-washed spinach. I have a non-stick pan. I put it on the stove, I put that in it, and in 5, 6, 8 minutes, I have a dish. And that's cooking from scratch. When I was an apprentice, cooking from scratch was to light the stove to start with paper and wood and then coal, and to keep that stove hot, which was the responsibility of the commis, was a very difficult thing in the kitchen, and the chef would get out of his mind by the time the people start sitting down and the stove getting lukewarm. So to keep that thing really hot, red on top and in the oven was a situation and an whole apprenticeship in itself, which doesn't exist anymore. Then, if you didn't have to catch the chicken, you at least had to pluck it, eviscerate it. You cook it in a pot where everything sticks, in an oven where you didn't have any calibration or temperature or whatever. You had to turn it, you have to baste it. This was a big deal, as I said, to cook a chicken, roast chicken from scratch. Now, as I said, to do a roast chicken from scratch with a skinless, boneless breast of chicken, sliced mushroom, takes 5 minutes. So you see, the world is entirely different. Well, certainly, what defines a great dish is your own taste to start with, and your own palate, and how discernible you are, and how you like that type of dishes, you know. Ingredients are maybe the most important part of a dish for me. Too much has been said about chef, not enough has been said about farmer who grow those ingredients, because we are absolutely nothing without the farmer. You know, and he doesn't get the credit for it. So if you have extraordinary ingredient, and if you don't mess it up by doing too much with it or overcooking and all that, if you are pretty calm about it, and then you probably will have a great dish. I mean, it can be just an extraordinary tomato at the right temperature with the best possible oil, best possible onion with it, and that's what we look for. You know, and very often people think in terms of great dish in the context of complicated dish, when in fact, I often discuss with the young chef and I said, okay, I would test you by doing a lobster roll, maybe a hamburger, maybe a hot dog, maybe a BLT, any of those, which are very, very mundane and very simple. You can always have a better bread, a better mustard, a better piece of meat, a better way of cooking it. You can always work in depth rather than otherwise and get something better. And you do. I have a place next to me in Connecticut where I go and have lobster roll. Well, I have a friend of mine, Jean-Claude, who is my dearest friend and was with me when I worked with the French president, so we've been cooking together 51 years. He'll come and he said, let's go have a lobster roll. He'll remember that lobster roll. Where the guy takes those Philadelphia flat roll that we started at Howard Johnson, actually when I lived there, and brown them on each side properly, and has just planned a lobster that he poached himself or steamed himself with butter on top, salt, pepper, and he put it, and that's it. But it's good quality. So you remember it and you go back to it. Well, if I open my refrigerator, I'm going to have eggs, I'm going to have onion, I'm going to have certainly a shallot, probably 2 or 3 types of either vegetable or salad, zucchini. I always have plenty in my refrigerator, along with the beer and milk and probably some cream as well. So those are ingredients that are in the refrigerator and in the pantry. I have a fair amount of canned, from canned tuna, but again, there is quality. You can have extraordinary tuna in can from Portugal or somewhere else. I had not long ago some apricot in can from Morocco. They were just fantastic, you know. And so again, or beans, I mean different type of beans. There is nothing wrong with canned beans, because if I cook beans, I will take beans, water, and salt, and basically that's what I'm going to have in that can. There is nothing foreign in that can that I wouldn't want to have in terms of a chemical product or whatever. Most important tool are your hand, without any question. And then after, you need a knife, you need a board to chop on, you need a pot, and that's basically what you need. That being said, of course, I have about 150 knives at my house, but you need basically 3 knives, you know, a chopping knife, a big, and then a utility knife about 7-inch, and a paring knife, you know, so, and preferably sharp one too. The world of great restaurants very often are difficult to define, you know. You will have a restaurant which open and everyone goes and it's fantastic, and you'll go back and everything is great, from the food to the service to from the first moment you're there. Someone say, I want to do the same thing. You open another restaurant, you go there, and everything is fine. Somehow it doesn't click exactly, and you'll tell people, did you like it? They say, yeah, it was excellent. I mean, how was the service? Service was very good too. Would you go back? Yeah, I probably will go back, but there is none of that excitement that you may have in that first restaurant. And sometimes it's something which is very, very difficult to define exactly, but certainly the quality of the food, the quality of the service, because you have to be felt welcome without people being condescending to you. So those are what make great restaurants, yes. Home is the best. Home is always the best restaurant around. Yeah, there are many other, I mean, as I say, I mentioned Jean-Georges in New York, as well as Daniel or you know, Keller, you know, Thomas Keller. It's extraordinary. Those are extraordinary restaurants, and there is only a few that I mentioned there. There is many, many, many more in New York and all over the country. I mean. Absolutely, even better in some way now, you know, in some way, because you know, for a European, very often they will look at American cuisine. Well, it's changing a great deal, but certainly 30, 40 years ago, you know, at American eating like 4 things, you know, eating hot dog, frankfurter, hamburger, fried chicken, and maybe canned macaroni or one of those things. And you do have people, what you may call the mall crowd, who will eat those type of dish and repeat over and over and over and over again. So in that context, that type of culinary spectrum, if you want, is very limited compared to what you have in Europe for a European. Conversely, however, if you're in a place like New York, and one night you eat Turkish, and another night you eat Thailandese, and another night you eat Chinese, and French and Italian, and so forth, your spectrum of taste is going to be much larger than most European, because even though there are, you know, Chinese restaurant and other kind of, you know, different type of cuisine restaurant in France, ethnic restaurant, yet 99.9% of French people eat French, 99.9% of Italian eat Italian, and so it goes in Germany and so forth, and in Belgium, because that's part of the tradition, that's part of a almost something that you're born with, you know, something which is visceral, something which, and part of sitting down at the table with the family, and for all of those years, so it built up that type of culinary culture as I have, you know.